Yeah, so here we are. Three Rivers Theater Company is going to put on Southern Fried Funeral. We're going to do it for real, live, no virtual. We're going to do it June 4th through the 6th at the historic Princess Theater. We're very excited about that opportunity again. And we want to thank the City of Harriman and Parks and Recreation for making that possible. But it's always exciting and a gift to be able to talk about the playwrights, to be able to talk to the playwrights about the show that you're doing. I mean, we don't always get to do that, right? And of course, I've known y'all forever. And if I have a choice to do my friends' plays or some Joe I don't know's plays, I'm going to choose my friends. So I'm just glad that when I do choose my friends, it's something really worthy and very good. So I know Southern Fried Funeral has been a huge success for you guys here in Yon, and that's fantastic. So I guess the first question I want to ask you is, what was the genesis of Southern Fried Funeral? I'm sure throughout the years on the Lanai I've heard this story, but I don't remember it. I mean, did you set out to say, hey, let's write a play about a Southern funeral, or so what happened?
So I was directing a play in Franklin. Well, I directed at a church for several years in a row. And I had done, we had done musicals, we had done Rumors, we had done Bad Year for Tomatoes. I mean, just different things. And I was always looking for comedies that I could do for that audience that had 10 to 12 people in it, excuse me, and that the cast was split evenly or close to evenly between roles for men and women.
Right.
And I had just gotten to the point that I couldn't find anything. And Nate and I had written at least one children's play for Chaffin's Barn.
Was that the Fish Pata, what's it called?
Yeah. Yes, I think it was Fish Fraga Pata Turnip.
Okay.
And I went to Nate and I said, what would you think about doing this? And he said, okay. So I went to the producers at the church and talked to them, and they were like, that's a great idea. We would love to do a world premiere. And so I had directed a student one act in college called Covered Dish. And it was all about the women in the kitchen on the day they get the meal ready on the day someone dies, or not dies, but the funeral is, and they're going to have lunch in the fellowship hall afterwards. And just this whole idea of how people react to different situations when they're grieving. Sometimes you can be really sad, sometimes you're biting, sometimes you're fighting, sometimes you're making inappropriate jokes.
That would be me.
Yeah, all of us, yeah, absolutely. And so we both really liked that idea, and that's what I brought to Nate. And as we were writing it, Nate put together the contract for the church, and we needed a title. And we put Southern Fried Funeral in as a placeholder until we could come up with something better. And we never did, and we never saw a reason to. As Nate says, it's like when you went to Blockbuster, you wanted to see what was on the box so that you knew that that's what you were getting.
Right.
When you rented the movie. And so that's how it became Southern Fried Funeral. It was a placeholder.
Wow.
Look, and one of the reasons why we put it all together, we really wanted to work together. We enjoyed the children's play that we wrote, and we wanted to work on something else. And the idea that, most of the new comedies we were coming across, and certainly that Dietz was coming across, were so much smaller, and it just wasn't what a community theater needed or the dinner theater we were working at needed. And so we wanted to make a newer comedy that served a bigger cast where we could play together and then also be able to play with our friends. And so right from the get-go, there were a couple of rules that we knew we were abiding by. We wanted it to be in one location, right? We knew we wanted it to be in this kitchen, that it had to have a multi-generational cast, and then it had to have really strong featured roles for some great actresses. We knew that those were the things that we wanted to do when we set out to do it. And those have been the things over and over again that carried the show to, we passed 100 productions last year, like early in the year last year. I mean, and it's
Wow.
because of stuff like that, you know? So like I'm so excited that y'all are doing this production. You'll be our first production back after the pandemic close in Tennessee. So I'm so excited to see that. And then, you know, the other ones that got postponed will be filling in after that. And you know, like, the thought that the reason why we did it is because we wanted to work with our friends, and we're still doing that this many years in productions later. That's great. Like, that's really amazing to me that carried this whole way.
Yeah. Well, I just love it. And, you know, I was telling the cast the other night, and they're all true Southerners. So I didn't really have to say this, but I was like, you know, you must treat these people with respect as to, you know, their accents and how they act. You know, we can have a tendency to be a caricature of sometimes, particularly when it's something you're used to, and it's like being yourself. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm not really acting. And but with this show, it's really important that if you are like that character, of course, just be that character. You don't have to put on any particular accent. And I said the most important reason for that is we don't want to disrespect anybody, but the audience knows these people. You know, I told them, having done 2 productions of it, I mean, you know, you coming through what we call the jointed line, when people would come through and, you know, tell you how they liked the play or didn't, which happened every now and then. But they would say, oh, you were just like my Aunt Jean, or, you know, you remind me so much of my mama. And so I just feel like with that sort of thing, it's really important to really ground these characters and, you know, just put on the comedy guard, if you will. So that's what I love so much about this play, is that I feel like, particularly with Dietz Southern roots and, you know, all that time in Detroit, Nate, I'm sure that played into your understanding of Southern. I said the other day that, let me finish my thought. But anyway, I think the play is so true to people in the South and how they deal with funerals. I remember my grandmother's family used to argue over who was going to call people and tell them somebody had died. Well, no, you called last time. I need to call him and tell him that he died. Yeah. So there was a great honor to share the news, I guess. But I don't know what I was going to say next, because that's just my life now. Sure. But so Nate, I just want to speak to you a little bit about outside of your Southern Fried Funeral life. So you write other plays that are not necessarily in the same ilk of Southern Fried Funeral. So tell us a little bit about you as a playwright, I guess, and why you do this.
Oh, sure. So I was a professional playwright before Dietz and I started working together. You know, like I met Dietz when I moved to Nashville, and we immediately, we really always wanted to work together. You know, like once we became friends, we knew that we also wanted to be, you know, like making new plays and in plays together and working on each other's projects and all that stuff. And it really like offered me a chance to write a different kind of stuff that was like we talked about, more expressly for these like regional theaters, community theaters, dinner theaters, all of that. And I love that stuff. Like I grew up on really strong comedies, and the sort of plays that I was writing and the plays that I was like developing with other theaters were not always like that. And so this was an opportunity to work on some other stuff. I really think that I would, you know, write the back of a cereal box if somebody would let me. Like I just love to do it. And so I've been very lucky to have a career working on my own, having a career working with Dietz on this play and its sequel, Southern Fried Nuptials, and then now, you know, starting to work in television and film. It's been great. And so like I'm really lucky to do that. My day job is working with Nashville Repertory Theater. I run their Ingram New Works project, which I develop new plays with other writers. So I work with writers all across the country on new plays. And it's great because it's all the same sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Like the thing that I've found that I miss the most over the past year wasn't any one particular story or play, but the actual like getting together of everybody to share that stuff.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
like I mean, like seriously, like it's not the you know, the basketball game at the high school or like the song at the open mic night that I'm missing. It's like everybody getting together and cheering, everybody getting together and clapping and talking about it, everybody getting together in the lobby of the play.
Yeah.
And I'm really lucky that I've been able to make my life in a bunch of those different lanes.
So I had asked the what are the people in the play, the actors, to send me some questions. I'm trying to locate those because you know actors always have questions. So I thought, well, I'll just, you know, I'll get them to ask you some questions so that they can get the answers themselves. But
Now they know we're not taking any rewrite suggestions, right? Like we're done. We're done with the
You know,
skit. We're finished
you
it.
know,
We're
I'm
not gonna.
not sure. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
All right. Well. All right. All right.
I'm not sure, Nate. Yeah. So I think one of the things that wasn't a question, but to y'all, but that I got asked by one of the actresses, she's playing Martha Ann, and she's from the South, so you know, it's not like I don't understand your culture thing, but she's like, what, the play never describes what the relationship is between Fairy June, Martha Ann, Benny Charles, and Dorothy. And I, in my life, have never even considered that because I was like, well, they're just all best friends and they come over through the back door and they have coffee together and they're the ones that are there when, you know, you need something. And Benny Charles clearly says he was a Rotarian. And she's like, yeah, I just wonder because it's never mentioned, you know, well, I'm Dorothy's best friend, whatever. And of course, we're not saying that it needs that at all, but I just thought that was interesting that I had just kind of accepted that. And, you know, she goes, has the audience ever wondered who they were? And I was like, well, no, because they just know. So I just thought that was an interesting observation of the actress that was playing that. But her question is, speaking to, you've got Southern Fried Funeral and you've got Southern Fried Nuptials, and she wants to know when Southern Fried Christmas is coming out. And she didn't know, I didn't say anything. So she just came up with that on her own volition. So is it still in the works?
Well, we have to finish Southern Fried Arbor Day first.
Man, I can't wait for that because Flag Day's been my favorite so far.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
See, what happened was.
well, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we've actually started a couple of different times, and just events have sort of gotten in the way. You know, I think the first time it was on the schedule at the church, Nate got a great gig and wasn't going to be able to commit a whole lot of time to it. And then we were going to do it the next year, and not to bring down the room, but, you know, our best friend passed away and we didn't feel like being funny. And so Nate actually wrote a pretty amazing grief play. But we didn't think the church was interested in that. So, and then you know, a pandemic and
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
You know, I'm sure we will. You know, like one of the things that was awesome about the other plays is they fit like right at that moment. We were like, oh yeah, like where we are in our lives, we want to talk about what's going on in these people's lives too. And I feel really strongly that we'll be able to do that. Truly, just in the last year, the sequel went through the publishing process. You know, so part of it has just been, oh, it takes a little time for this stuff to happen.
Right.
But I gotta be honest with you, one of the reasons, I mean, yes, life definitely got in the way. That's like the main reason, and all of the other things that go around that. But also, we loved the characters so much, and there were so many like rich ways for them to bounce off each other. It wasn't like we didn't have any ideas. We had too many. You know, we were like, and you know, like they could have filled 2 seasons of television overnight. You know, we were just like really so excited by
Well, maybe that's an idea.
watching them bounce around.
Yeah.
Well, there's another reason we got delayed.
Yeah. So going along, you said, you know, we just loved all the characters so much. Do either of you have a favorite character? That's a question from, I don't know.
Do you have a favorite character? I do.
I have my favorite characters to write for.
Oh, who are your favorite? Oh, now I'm
And-
curious. I don't mean to take over. Who are the ones you like writing for best?
No, please take over.
My favorite characters to write for are Beecham and Sammy Joe.
Oh,
That
yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
I just love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all know. I mean, we all know everybody in the play, but we all know that couple.
Yeah.
That she is large and she is in charge, and he adores her. But he can only go. She can only go so far before he.
Yeah.
Lips
That's
out.
Yeah,
all-
I think
That's all for credit at the country club.
Yeah.
I think Sammy Joe's my favorite character. Like I do love writing for them. My favorite character to write for is Martha Ann. And the reason why she's my favorite character to write for is because she's got to carry the whole structure of the scene, and she always gets that last joke. So we do like the jokes, and then she gets whatever that last one is, and man, I love that every time.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
love
that question about how they're related, like one of the things that Dietz and I found really early on, I mean, like my experience growing up and his experience growing up, very, very different. Like you said, I grew up north. I mean, big Irish Catholic family, and there's some similarities there. But like definitely, as we talked about it, we kept finding these common areas. And one of them was you've got like family, like your inherited biological family, and then you've got the family outside of that, that they're also always around. And for sure now Dietz and I are that for each other. You know what I mean? Like we are family, like no question about it. And there's all sorts of territory that includes. And so you're like, oh, I know this person. Oh, I know this person. And man, it took us no time at all to be like, yeah, I know somebody like Sammy Joe. Like, Sammy Joe is somebody we know for sure. And I feel like over and over again in the play, there's all these little corners where those characters really feel. I mean, Benny Charles feels like a real person. I mean, like he's got some like square jokes, but that that guy. And definitely that marriage between Beecham and Sammy. Man, those scenes were easy to write. Easy.
Let me see. Are there? I got asked this by a couple of people. Are the characters based on real people?
I'm back.
You get to answer that one.
I didn't hear it. What was it?
Oh, hi. Are the characters based on real people?
Mostly no. At least in my mind, they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, Dewey is, for me, he's my grandfather. And my grandfather, fortunately, is still living, but he is the epitome of a good man. So when she runs through his list of, if he was at choir practice or Kiwanis or the Rotarians or whatever, I mean, that is my grandfather. I mean, he'll be 89 in July, and he's still serving on boards and going to Kiwanis on Zoom right now. But I mean, that's it. And although I never heard my grandmother say it's awful hard being married to a good man, I know that was a thought that she had.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the rest of them, no, not. I mean, they're sort of amalgamation.
Yeah.
Of people. Yeah.
Specifically, Anita Hewling is playing Fairy June. She wondered if Fairy June was based on somebody, and I said, "Well, now she's based on Lady Sasser." But
Yeah.
Yeah, she asked specifically about that.
Well, the name came from
My aunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, her name is, yes. So my grandmother her name was Floyd Jean. She had two siblings, Fairy June and Benny Charles. And we loved that idea of double names because it is so Southern.
Yes.
And I had an uncle, Benny Charles. I told you that. But then one of my grandparents' best friends was Martha Ann. And although I swear to you, it wasn't until I was in high school that I knew her name was spelled Martha Ann, because everybody just called her Martha Ann.
Martha
Yeah.
Ann.
Yeah. And so none of those people are actually based on who we named them after.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, my Aunt June was a a Kansas Republican committee woman. She was not Daffy or Ditzy at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Let me see what else I got here. Sandy asked if Ozella was inspired by a real person, but I guess you've answered that really in that.
Well, we all know somebody like that. I mean, all we did
Oh,
was,
well, yeah,
you know, like grab
yeah.
a bunch of the stories from a person like that and, you know, put those details in there.
Right.
yeah. And a little bit was we knew, and me specifically, the folks that we were writing for at the church.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that, and I had worked with them, a lot of them for years. And so I sort of knew where to aim and then just heightened it from there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think there's some great character detail built in all there. And you were talking about this a little bit before, but you know, like these characters are real. You know, there are cartoonish and big things that happen, but every single one of us has been to a funeral where some outrageous something happened. And later when you tell the story, it just seems so huge. I mean, it's like one of those events. Like that causes those sorts of things. Same as a wedding, you know, in the sequel. And I think these characters have a lot of really rich detail in them that help ground it and help make it feel real. And one of the ways that I know that that carries over is because so frequently the casts from these shows perform in Southern Fried Funeral and then also in its sequel because they felt so strongly about the performance or so lived in that they're like, oh yeah, we know somebody just like Ozella. That reminds me of the lady that I used to work for at the library or whatever. And you're like, you know, like, you know exactly who that is. And so you start to, the actors want to stick with it and the audiences want to see those characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, you know, I have spoken of this before, but I just feel like they're so beautifully created. And this cast is doing a fantastic job going to task on that. And the kid that's playing Dewey Jr., he's just delightful. He's just awesome. Okay, but his name is Brant Helms. I should give him a shout out, I guess, whatever. Yeah, I call him Doofus most of the time. He's fine with that. So Shelby Stout, who is playing Sammy Joe, wants to know what your favorite casserole is to take to the bereaved.
Oh, solid question.
Yeah, it totally depends. Like if it's a good friend in my peer group, say for instance, they had maybe not a death, but surgery certainly, I'll take them a cranberry and vodka casserole.
Yes, I spoke of that.
You know, you put your vodka and your cranberry and your lime in a casserole dish and you carry it on over.
And you go with it and sit. That's the magic trick.
Yeah. Yeah. But if it's you know, for real and somebody has passed and I'm carrying food over, then I'll take an asparagus casserole or what my grandmother made and we referred to as pink stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, which is cranberry, you know, the jellied cranberry and whipped cream and fruit, and you freeze it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It freezes. So well.
It does.
Delicious.
It freezes beautifully.
I love an asparagus casserole. That's old school. So how about you, Nate?
My go-to is baked ziti, because it, you know, like it'll stay. It'll keep for a little while.
Yeah.
You know, like it'll keep for a little while.
It freezes well too.
It does.
You know, I often think about that pasta salad that you make with those big chunks of cheese in it. Well, I mean,
I'll bring it to your house. I'll bring it to your house. The secret is it's mostly from a box. I promise.
Well, it's just those chunks of cheese, man. I don't know what it is.
Well, never leave cheese in a dryer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's just a good rule of thumb.
It is a good rule.
It is a very good rule of thumb. And, you know, never peel your zucchini. Last question I've got from the cast. I think this is the last question. Yes. So Garrett Wright, who's playing Atticus, he says, when writing dialogue or references that are so specific to Southern culture, where do you start? What influences did you pull from? And I think you've spoken to some of that, but we can kind of capsulize that a little bit.
Oh, well, real life,
Yeah, mostly real life, you know. And I mean, like a little bit, like you've seen this stuff before. Do you know what I mean? Like you've seen, you know, like and so deciding uh which things are not it's not like in reference to other plays about Southern funerals or stuff like that. It's sort of like, well, what are the new corners? What's the stuff that you haven't seen before? Like, what are those new spots? And I think that like so in that way, yeah, we're definitely aware of the other plays, stories, movies, you know, books that are about this kind of stuff. But I think for us, like, man, I don't mean to be getting into like process about it or whatever, but it was so much about the characters for us more than anything else, right? Like we were like, we just wanted these really rich roles that actors could play. And the plot stuff, although it matters, I mean, like the story is interesting. I'm not saying it's not. It's the relationships between the characters that you're really watching. And so like for us, like there were plenty of things that we went out of our way to try to keep in that we had to like cut out or put in the sequel or like, you know, I mean, you know, like there's definitely stuff that we loved that we knew, okay, it kind of had to go, you know, in order to like keep the story going.
Yeah, in the original production there was a preacher. And
that's right.
And we were like, there's no need for him to be there.
Yeah, and we really, I mean, and we had stuff to say about it. We had like, you know, like the character had good moments, you know, we're just like, well, we actually need to give this stuff to somebody else. And so that's most of what it's about, is like finding like what the center is and going out from there. And for us, it was like primarily those like core relationships between Harleen and her mom, Harleen and her sister, you know, like the mom and the sisters, and then what was going on between Harleen and Atticus and everything.
Yeah, Garrett has been, I don't want to say playing at, because I don't mean to downplay it at all, but he's been starting to write plays, and he's starting to kind of put thoughts and ideas to paper. And one thing that he really wants to do is he wants to do an Appalachian retelling of Faust. So that's one thing he's working on. Yeah, and we have been doing murder mysteries, you know, and Donnie and I just throw together a plot, and then we all go up there and make up stuff. And Garrett's been coming up with a couple of plot lines, so that's been really cool. Yeah, so you know, I say sometimes that as a theater artisan, saying that you do murder mysteries is kind of like saying you're a mime, but at the same time, at the same time, you know, you got to do what you got to do to fill the coffer, right? And I mean, people really are enjoying it, and we have a great venue that we're working with here. Well, two venues actually. So it's been lucrative and fun, and it was something creative that we could do and keep ourselves relevant and keep kind of our stable of actors that keep coming back to us. Although we want to expand that, you know, creatively involved. Speaking of playwriting, we are going to do a playwriting contest this year. We've started putting it out there, but we haven't gone crazy mad with advertising it. I think, Donnie, you talked to Nate a little bit about it. And so it's we are looking for plays that are faith-based or family-friendly. And we haven't
Can we enter? Because we have a play about Arbor Day that we've been.
I have heard about, of course, you know, it just cannot have been produced before Dietz. So, I mean, Nate.
Yeah, it hasn't been. For some reason, nobody wants to do plays about Arbor Day.
I know, and I thought it was a great script. But you know, I mean, who doesn't love a story about trees? But yeah, so Donnie wanted me to. He's text messaging me questions. He's right there. I love him. He's wanted you to talk, Dietz, a little bit about what you are doing in your life professionally right now.
Well,
as much as you want to speak to it, of course.
Mostly just trying not to go crazy. No. Do you want the whole 9 or just what I'm doing right now or how I got there? So back in 2008, I don't know if you know, but there's a little recession that happened. And at that time, I was working in theater management and trying to book groups to come to a dinner theater here in Nashville.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and it got harder and harder to sell those seats to people that couldn't pay their light bill. And it just became soul sucking. So I said I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I spent the next year waiting tables and being on stage and directing and choreographing and writing as much as possible and directing. So I did that for a couple of years. And then a good friend of mine who is the original Dorothy was the executive director of Miriam's Promise, which is a nonprofit here in Nashville that serves all of Middle Tennessee, offering pregnancy counseling, parenting coaching, and adoption-related services. And the office manager was going to be out for 8 weeks for medical leave. And so Debbie asked if I would come and answer the phones. And I said, sure. And so I did that for 8 weeks. And then I was the event chair for a spring fundraiser for Miriam's Promise. And she kept me on after that. And then the board hired me full-time in June 2011 to raise money, which is something I'd never done in my life. And then from there, I became the associate executive director, and then Debbie retired in 2019, and I became the president and CEO. And so that's what I've been doing mostly for the last 10, it'll be 10 years in June.
Yeah.
My last professional gig was the summer of 2011 when we did Annie at Chaffin's Barn, and I played Rooster.
Mhm.
And having a full-time day job and then doing that 4.5-hour play at night just about put me in the ground. So I've done a couple of shows since then, but that's really it. I got a 13-year-old and an almost 7-year-old. So we've been doing virtual school, and there is a reason that I am not an educator. So I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, I've heard that many times during this this pandemic situation. So what's in the future for both of you? What are you looking ahead to?
Seeing each other in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've not done that in
months.
Well, I mean, we saw each other briefly on Christmas morning, but before that, it had been almost a year and a half. So.
Well, that Nate, do you have gosh, I can't talk. What professionally do you have on the horizon, and what are you working on, new play-wise or script and television-wise?
Sure, yeah. So I'm working on a new play in my residency at Nashville Rep and a new TV pilot, and then I'm sort of waiting. The plays that I had scheduled to premiere are still sort of postponed. And so like as theater is coming back and rescheduling seasons and stuff like that, I'm waiting to hear when that'll be. But I'm looking forward to it. You know, the Nashville Rep and Broadway and a bunch of other regional theaters are all really starting to come back, you know, like outdoor productions and large productions this summer, and then definitely in the fall. And so I think we're all just kind of trying to navigate our way safely into that.
As theaters start to open up again, that the attendance is really going to help some of us get out of the slump that we're in, right? So, was that a cat?
That was a cat. I don't have a cat, so I don't really know.
Bingo is coming back to get you.
I don't really know. I mean, the window's open, and I've got an open can of tuna right here, so I think that's.
Oh, okay. So Nate, I have told the story a million times about the first time I met you when you came to the dinner theater to audition for The Odd Couple, and Jenny Wallace was directing, and you did this monologue when you only had a minute to live, and you were trying to tell your family, bye and everything, and only a minute to leave, minute to live. And one of my favorite lines is your little daughter, no, Janie, honey, daddy's got like 30 seconds. And then did we come to find out that you had kind of like put that together on your way or something? I mean, I don't know. But it was funny. It was like, we get a 60-second monologue and he had 60 seconds to live. So boom. And I remember
I got the job.
Yep.
I got the job.
You did, because you walked out and Jenny goes, "Oh, I like him."
Oh.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you guys would like to add to this before we say adieu?
You had said something about Dorothy's monologue at the top of scene 3.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts when you were writing that monologue as to how you feel about Dorothy's attitude. Does that make sense?
2020 was the 10-year anniversary of the first production of this play. So, we've been in the world of New Edinburgh since 2009, 2008 or 9, right? And I won't say that we were completely wasted every time we wrote, but we certainly drank some rum when we wrote.
I don't remember that.
Right. I'm not sure either of us drinks rum anymore, but but I remember thinking, and most of the time we were writing in my kitchen, and I remember that we were thinking, she needs a moment. The audience needs to see her drop the "I've been to Big Star because I knew people were coming," drop the "Sammy Joe, I don't need you fighting with your sister over your daddy's coffin," to drop all of that and go and just be in her routine, and then it hits her. And so that, I think it sort of came from that. What was that going to look like? Because we've all grieved, we all know how we went through it, but how was she going to get through it? And I don't know why. Maybe Nate had way too much rum, but he left that assignment to me.
Oh yeah, entirely. Well, that's what I was going to say. I think we had been working on the play for a while, and we even ourselves were just I don't mean to make it sound like Dewey's a placeholder. It's not like that. But the audience and us and these other characters are projecting an awful lot. We don't get to see that character, right? And all of a sudden we found that we had this spot where we needed a moment where Dorothy really sat down and the audience understood the relationship that they had. And I just absolutely was like, well, man, this is on you, man. Good luck. And the idea was that Dietz would sort of sketch something in, and that we would work on it together. And instead, Dietz, nailed it from 30 yards away the very first time. And I think that part of the magic of that scene is that it really isn't a monologue. It is a conversation. These are things that she doesn't get to say to her husband, at its best, when theater is really working, there's definitely kind of an exorcism that goes on with those characters, but also a cool invocation. And it is a moment where that ghost comes to life, and he's truly there. And in almost every production of it I've seen, she's wrapped in his sweater and talking to a spot where he is on stage. That scene is somebody who's really desperate for the ghost of her husband to talk back, and she tries everything she can to make that happen. And and it is sad. It is the place for real grief in this play, and that grief is a cold and factual and real, a concrete, I guess is what I mean, a grief. And that's the moment where you really feel it. And the people that we've lost since then to now, the people that we lost before we wrote it, it's those moments where you do something dumb, serve your, make a plate for that person, where it suddenly is an avalanche and hits you. And I think that's what Dietz did so beautifully. It's a small moment like that kicks all that off.
Oh, guys, thank you so much. This has been so fun talking to you guys, and it's good for my soul.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for doing the play. We're so glad that you're doing the play.
That is truly my pleasure. And the Rome County, it's going to be Rome County's pleasure when they see it. So it's going to be exciting for them to see it, because we had it on the schedule last year and we didn't get to do it. So we're coming now. We're coming June 4th through the 6th. Thank you so much. We will post this on our Facebook page by tomorrow, probably, and spread it to the world. And we'll also put it on our webpage so people can have an opportunity to get to know you guys.